All right, so I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. Seems like we're set up well. You guys did a great job. You're on top of it. So let me kind of get us going here by first saying, welcome back. It is great to have class with you guys again. A lot's happened since I last saw you. So we've actually haven't been together for almost 20 days. The last time we had class together was actually March 5th, which is a long time ago, and a lot's happened since then. So it's great to have class with you guys. Great to see everyone again. I appreciate you jumping in here. Looking forward to conversations. Trying to do things as much as we can as if we were there in person. I was actually on campus yesterday just for a little bit to pick up a few things I needed. And it was wild to think that there was all these classes going on, but there was no classes being done in any of the classrooms. So I was walking by empty classroom that normally there's students and teachers in, and there was no one there, but yet education was going on. So I think it's pretty remarkable that you guys are making the switch, we're making the switch, and trying to do the best we can with the situation. So I think that's great. So again, it's great to be back with you guys. As we go forward, one of the things I definitely want to make clear to you is that I understand our class is only a small part of what's going on for everyone. So I know that you have your own personal things going on, loss of jobs, maybe having your job explode where there's more things going on, your personal health concerns, family health, so please keep that in mind in the context of this class. I understand that. I'm hoping to continue to learn the information, do well with it, but also don't want this to turn into a huge stressor for you. So we'll try to keep things balanced and managed out, try to keep lectures moving smoothly for us and things along those lines. And with that being said, I'm here to guide you through class, continue to do things we were doing before. We might do them a different way. Maybe it's for the better, maybe it doesn't quite work the same, but I'm here to help you with that. And if you're struggling with classes, struggling with things going on, please, by all means, let me know. I'm available through email. For office hours, I'll be on chat through the Carmen. I'm happy to do Zoom sessions with you, whatever it takes to kind of help you with doing well. If there's things we haven't addressed that you wanted to, we can come back to those as well. So, again, here to help, want us to be really successful with things. What I want to do is spend just a little bit of time highlighting some of the biggest changes to class, make sure we've kind of gone through these, and then we'll get into content. We'll jump right back into things. So one of the biggest things that's changed is that everything is now going to be virtual for us. So these interactions are going to be virtual. If you're meeting with me, it's going to be virtual. So we are going to be meeting via Zoom. So you're in good shape. You guys are here. If you have others that need help with getting into Zoom, please help them with that. But this is going to be the approach that we're going to continue to take. I also want to make sure that you guys are aware that lectures are being recorded, so be a bit careful what you say and things like that. But mostly so that you know this, because I will post this on YouTube later on. The idea behind this is that if you miss a class because of something going on, you want to review something because you're maybe going a little bit faster because things going on, it will be posted there. So give me just a little bit of time to get everything edited and up on YouTube. But for the first time in my life, I can say I actually have a legitimate reason to be on YouTube. So I'll have that for you guys. The other big change to highlight this slide is that we're adjusting the syllabus to account for the new semester date. So make sure that you're keeping an eye on the syllabus, being aware of the things that have changed, including the exam date, the last exam date. I will highlight these things and make sure that you're aware of them as we're going along. But make sure that you're paying attention to that syllabus. It is uploaded on Carmen and things from there. And I will be posting information where the YouTube account name is. So once we get the first videos in, I'll send you an email with that, so that you'll have that information. We can check in on other things. So I'll make sure I have that for you guys. Another thing to note, kind of wrapping out the biggest changes, exams will be done as a take-home. So I will explain what that looks like. We will have our first exam on Thursday. So keep that, not this Thursday, but next Thursday. So keep that in mind. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Quizzes will also be take home. So the due date for quizzes is on the syllabus. You'll see it's the last class that we have prior to the exam. The first quiz number 4 is posted online. You'll see it's a little bit more of a different format than what we've done before. And so keep an eye on that. That is kind of one adjustment. We won't be doing quizzes during class time, but it's something for you to do outside of classroom. Okay? So to get a little bit of practice with things, what I want to do is answer this question as a group. So what has been an interesting thing for you kind of caused by this virus? Okay, so in thinking about what's going on around you, what are some of the biggest changes you've had? So you can respond in the chat window. You can share it out loud if you'd like. I'll say the biggest change for me are one of the more interesting kind of weird changes that my desk has been a mess for 6 years straight since I moved into the house. It was only until we had to set up working from home that I finally cleaned my desk. So to kind of get a little bit of practice with this, you're welcome to share over the mic your response to this. You're welcome to type it out. But what are some things that have changed for you as a function of this virus? Yeah, there's no chicken noodle soup anywhere. And it's fortunate because I know so many have lost jobs, lost positions. I know as a psych department, we try to protect our students. Sleep is definitely one I think has probably gotten goofed up for everyone. Yeah, no money's no good. Yeah, I think the service industry has been really tough in terms of waiters and waitresses. TikTok obsession. Okay, so there's a big change there too. Yeah, it's a sleep schedule. That one's gotten me. Getting up early was a bit tricky. Oh, I could only imagine trying to do a band assignments right now. That's crazy. All that different music being played all at once. Pop Tarts. Yeah, the dogs are great until you're stuck with them all the time. I think yeah, you're gonna get kind of have shadows for the whole time. All right, guys. I think we've got it. I think the tech side's in good shape. So what I want to do is go ahead and jump into the content. Again, jump in, ask questions, respond to questions. You can turn your mic on to do that. Jump in through the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. That's why I'm looking to the right as I have the chat screen up over there. And we'll keep covering things. And hopefully, despite all the things you have going on with issues with work and not being able to get toilet paper or no chicken noodle soup, we'll still be able to do well with the class. So let's go ahead and get back into things. And where we were when we left off, again, many, many days ago, was talking about antisocial behavior. So that was our topic for this particular lecture. And we talked about two examples of antisocial behavior. So we talked about prejudice first, and we covered that. And we were working on aggression. So just to kind of get us a little bit of a reminder, what were some of the key things we talked about related to prejudice? And this is where, go ahead and turn your mic on and just kind of share what were some of the aspects we talked about. You can go back to your notes. You can go back to what we talked about in the PowerPoint before. Just kind of jump in and share what are some of the aspects of prejudice that we talked about. Again, getting our brains kind of thinking about things again. Okay, so what were some aspects of prejudice? We talked about the ABCs of prejudice, talked about some different reasons why prejudice occurs. What were some things that we just kind of review a little bit? Again, just jump in with your response.
All right, hi guys. So we talked about the scapegoat theory, some experiments that showed prejudice, aggression, kind of the behavior of it, and how it kind of stems from prejudice and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so I love, Lauren, that's the first one that you went with there. I think it's a really important one for us to start with. Where do we see kind of scapegoat theory already being applied to the coronavirus? Okay, so this has been kind of a big mainstream news piece. Where do we see this is occurring?
I know the president was like, it's the Chinese virus. Like he just instantly blamed them for it.
Okay, and I think you're tapping into what the media is picking up on. What others are saying too is that partly they're scapegoating Chinese because that's the origin of the virus, and so there's concern about the Chinese and Asian population and how they're being treated, and the stigmatization because of that. And so it fits perfectly with this scapegoat theory. So that's a great start for us in terms of applying things we're talking about here to what's going on around us, and we'll be doing quite a bit of that. Okay, great start. Other aspects that we can talk about in terms of relating of summarizing some of the key pieces of prejudice. Okay, so let's get kind of 2 or 3 other points. Okay, again, you can flip back to your notes. You can even scroll through the PowerPoint. I'm just pulling up the key pieces.
Reinforced or rewarded aggression.
Okay. All right. So you talk about how when we get to aggression, kind of talking about how we can reinforce it, how that's especially kind of related back to our scapegoat theory. The more that we kind of reinforce the negativity towards the group, more likely to continue. Let's get kind of one other piece related to kind of our prejudice. You know, we can think about prejudice, stereotyping, discrimination. We can talk about categorization. Talked about scapegoat theory is a great one to apply. Okay, so let's get one other piece about prejudice before we'll start delving back into aggression.
That prejudice kind of increases with
sorry.
temporary frustration.
Okay, so say that again. So you're talking about frustration?
That prejudice usually increases with temporary frustration.
Okay, so that's again something very perfect. So I know, you know, the collective feeling right now is that frustration that we can't do things like normal, we can't get the resources like normal, we can't, you know, see our family and friends necessarily, and so then that prejudice starts to increase, and that's again kind of tying us to prejudice towards, you know, different groups, potentially even trying the scapegoat theory. So that's another great one. Okay, I think there was another comment someone was trying to share, so jump back in.
Oh, I was just gonna say the us versus them, the in-group versus out-group bias.
Okay, and so what specifically about it?
So like the in-group, which is like favoring your group and like misjudging like other group versus like looking at the out-group and like thinking you're like better than them or having your own view.
So great answer. That's really kind of getting at the crux of prejudice, stereotyping, discrimination, as we really categorize individuals kind of naturally. It helps us organize information, helps us gather information, and part of that categorization leads exactly to what Elise is saying, that you then think about things kind of either you're with us or against us. And if you're with us, you have positive biases, you feel good towards that in-group, but you start feeling more negative towards that out-group. You might see them as all being very similar to each other versus kind of distinguishing more of those unique differences in our in-group. We also see too that that's partly where we start to see the prejudice, discrimination, stereotyping coming from, because we feel more negative towards that outgroup. We're going to feel more stereotypes towards that outgroup, and we're going to discriminate more towards that outgroup. And part of the reason we're spending just a minute with prejudice, just to kind of remind us, but it's also, as you guys are alluding to, it's also a form of aggression. Okay, so when we talked about aggression before, okay, we'll kind of lay this out. We talked about it in having kind of a couple of key components. The first of which is making sure that we have our definition of it. So some of this is just a quick reminder before we'll get into new content, because it's kind of been a while since we've talked about it. And the idea with behaviors associated with aggression is behavior with the intent of harming another person. And remember, I highlighted that part of that also includes that you're trying to avoid the harm. And so we can see that individuals are going to harm others for a variety of different purposes and a variety of different means. So we want to make sure that we're kind of mindful of the fact that aggression can happen and function as a couple of different ways. So first off, aggression can have many forms. So aggression can be physical, like what we think about, so that those fights, pushing someone, punching someone, but also we talked about how aggression can be verbal or relational. Okay, so maybe saying something negative about another person, swearing at them, belittling them, relational in terms of maybe not connecting with them, not supporting them, kind of making someone the black sheep of the family, maybe not communicating with them, giving someone the cold shoulder. Those are all kinds of demonstrations of relational aggression. And we talked about how women are more likely to demonstrate relational aggression and men are more likely to demonstrate physical aggression. So a little bit of gender differences there. We talk about aggression too, it can be planned or reactive. Okay, so it can be planned where you're harming someone else with the intent of getting some kind of response later on, or it can be reactive in the sense that you know, it's in that particular moment. So getting cut off on the way to work, you know, something we used to experience until now, you know, can lead to aggression. Okay, maybe or that reactive aggression, you know, maybe the dog's kind of barking at you consistently and kind of driving you nuts, causes you to kind of yell at them, kind of you know, be hostile towards them. All that can be kind of part of this reactive response that we have. And lastly, too, aggression can be driven by hostile rage, okay? Or it can be cold, calculated means to an end. Okay, so that hostile rage, you're doing it because you're so upset, you're so aroused that you're gonna harm others, or it could be that that aggression is being used because you're trying to get something. Okay, so it's kind of working towards a particular step or a particular outcome and doing it very carefully. We're really kind of processing things carefully and working towards an end goal. Okay, we see this in terms of some of the politics. You see this in terms of kind of gaining favorability. It's something that happens. Okay? So let me pause here to see if we have any questions as we kind of revisit prejudice, revisit aggression, before we'll start getting into our new material for today, kind of getting us moving forward again. So I'll pause here. If you guys are all good when I say, hey, if you have any questions, send me a quick message in chat saying that you're all good. That way I know that we're all set. So if you're all good, let me know, thumbs up, stuff like that. Keep in mind, I don't get a lot of feedback without you guys sharing things, so I appreciate it. All right, seems like we're set, which is perfect because we're just reviewing things, making sure we're there. All good in the neighborhood. I love it. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into our new area of talking about aggression. And here what we're going to do is we're going to talk about aggression specifically in the media. So that's what we're going to focus on for this last section of talking about aggression, because there's a lot of debate about the influence of aggression in the media. Excuse me. And we'll see how it can have a really important influence on others. And again, this fits very well with talking about social psychology. We're talking about influencing others. Okay, so let's walk ourselves through this idea. What we see is that aggression gets portrayed in video, music, books, and other media, and it follows and starts to teach a script. Okay, so one of the things that I'm doing right now with Katie is we're watching some of the old Marvel movies. So we're watching Endgame and the movie before that, and so much of that movie involves aggression. Okay, so it's something that we might not think of, because it's kind of mythical characters and things like that, but it is still a form of aggression, and we're watching that. So about an hour every day, we're consuming direct media that's related to aggression. And partly what happens as we read books, we watch videos, listen to music, it teaches us information, and this information can be positive, it can be information that helps us grow, helps us learn, but we also see too that what happens with aggression in media is it might start to then teach us a script. Okay, so let's talk about what that script looks like. And this is something that you're relatively familiar with. We talked about this a bit before. We talked about kind of heuristics and social cognition. And remember, with scripts, we're basically saying that this is a way that we kind of act in a prescribed fashion. Okay, so these are culturally constructed directions on how to act that are downloaded from media as kind of a file or program in the mind. Okay, so I'll read that for you again. That these are culturally constructed directions on how to act. Basically, they kind of become a file or program in the mind. So basically, we develop scripts for all kinds of things. And this is where we started with talking about scripts. We talked about just developing a script for going to Chipotle the first time. Okay, so you weren't quite sure how the process went with ordering your burrito. But then once you did it once, you kind of developed a script of how you go through that process. We talked about scripts when you visit a professor in their office hours. I think one of the things that's most interesting right now is that scripts are being written all over the place. You're now developing scripts for what do online classes look like? How will they proceed? How will we communicate? How are students answering questions? Whether through chat or sharing their answers. These are all scripts that we're now downloading. And as you go to other classes, as you potentially may take other online classes, these same scripts are then going to apply. Okay, so that was the thing I was most interested in, is what was my script going to look like? And now, when we take this a step further, when we're confronted with new situations, we might go to these social scripts to guide our response. The idea here is that we go through all kinds of new experiences. When we go through these experiences, we might say, hey, how should I respond? And one of the ways that we might do this is we might go back to something that we saw before. Okay, so I talked about kind of this idea of a social script where if you were aggressive before and that gets rewarded, you may say, well, hey, when something negative happens to me, the social script I'm going to enact is one that involves aggression. Okay, so maybe I saw a TV show where someone wanted to get money from someone else, so they threatened that person. It was successful in the show, so I'm going to apply that script now that I'm trying to get money from someone else. And again, these scripts make life a lot easier for us. They allow us to kind of know how to proceed through things. They minimize how much thinking we have to do, our cognition. So we like scripts, but we have to be careful how these scripts can then kind of influence us. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about some of the research related to effects of social scripts, and then I'll pause at that point to pick up any questions or comments. Now, when we talk about the effects of social scripts, researchers have found that exposure to one aggressive story can increase other forms of aggressive behavior. Okay, so they've done this through all different forms of media, through music, TV, movies, in this case, talking about an aggressive story. And so what we see here is that we can even take something as simple as watchers of TV crimes see the world as more threatening. Potentially they see the world as more threatening because they need that, need an aggressive response to defend themselves. That's what they've seen in the world. And I've noticed this myself. When I talk with my mom, who's up in Milwaukee, I can tell how much TV she's watched, how much news she's watched, by the way she just kind of talks about the world around us. Okay, sometimes it's more positive. Other times she kind of talks about all these different threats that she's experiencing, where she's worried about her health, her safety, things along those lines. And so you can see that her view, the way she's viewing the world, is being influenced by then the crime TV that maybe she's seeing or what she's consuming. I'll share kind of a ridiculous story, kind of highlights this. For a while, Katie and I were watching the show Castle, which features Nathan Fillion. And basically, Castle is him going around with detectives, solving crimes. He's a writer. His partner is the detective. And so he's trying to help solve crimes, and he writes about these things. And that's kind of the basic premise of the story, premise of the show. And one of the things I found myself doing, which was really weird, is that while I was out for a run, I was thinking about how to create the perfect crime. Okay, so how do you get away with a crime? I was like, as I was running, I was like, this is a ridiculous thought. I was like, where is this coming from that that's something I'd process when I'm out for this run? But one of the things that made me realize it was something that was salient to me. I was starting to see the world as kind of more threatening, more that this is how people navigated it based on this TV show that I was watching. The next study we'll highlight here, I think, is probably the most kind of poignant demonstration of what happens with these social scripts. It's kind of one of the most surprising findings that I think we'll cover in class. And basically what researchers found is that participants randomly assigned to watch explicit pornography found that they suggested shorter sentences for rapists and accepted the myth that victims may have enjoyed the rape. Okay, so I'll read that for you again, and then we'll unpack it a little bit. So participants simply randomly assigned to watch explicit pornography. The study participants suggested shorter sentences for rapists and accepted the myth that victims may have enjoyed the rape. So this is something that just by watching a short video, consuming just a little bit of media, was enough to change people's perceptions, their acceptance of, shorter sentences, that the person enjoyed the rape, really changed their mindset in a kind of very negative way, where it seemed like it was making it more socially acceptable to harm someone else through rape and other harmful acts just by simply watching this explicit pornography. So I think it's a kind of really poignant demonstration of what the researchers are trying to show here. Okay? So I'll pause here to see if you have questions. Jump in through the mic. I'll look for them over chat. Before we'll keep kind of processing where we see social media as developing these scripts and how they can have an importance. I'll just highlight too that these slides are posted on Carmen. So if you're not getting everything down word for word, that's okay. Again, this will be on YouTube as well. So I'll try to pace things out well for you guys, but just in case I get a little too fast, there are other places as well. So questions or comments before we kind of move forward here?
Are like social scripts and like social cues similar?
So great question. I love that you jumped in. So I think they're a little bit different, but they kind of build on each other. A social cue is a little bit more kind of saying kind of what's going on in the environment, cueing you into different behaviors. A social script is kind of more saying, hey, this is a situation, how would I plug into it? But I think you could draw the connection to saying that if I get a cue that someone might aggress towards me, I'm going to enact that social script to be aggressive towards them. Or conversely, if someone seems like they're being polite to me, I'm then going to act that social script that says I should be polite back to them. So I think you're going to use those social cues as part of the situation to help you determine what social script do you want to kick in. So I wouldn't say that their social cues and social scripts are the same, but I think that they're going to work together. It's a great comparison or great connection to make. Okay, so nicely done. Other kind of questions or thoughts? All right, so let's keep going. If I miss something, we can always double back to it. I know it's a little trickier format, but let's keep kind of unpacking this idea of aggression in the media. We can see too that there's other effects. So exposure to violence in the media, especially pornography, seems to increase rather than release male aggressive impulses. So as we get into talking about different psychological disorders, we'll get into talking about catharsis, so Freud's idea of catharsis, we'll see that, in fact, watching pornography actually isn't a catharsis for males. It doesn't reduce aggressive impulses, but rather it can potentially increase them. Okay? We see that media can portray minorities, women, and poor, and others with having less power as being stupid, weak, or submissive, less human, and less deserving of their victimhood. Okay, so you see that media can portray women and minorities in kind of lower status positions, kind of more, the helpless victim, the person who can't contribute as much, someone having less importance. We see too that when you look at, like, especially James Bond movies and who the bad guy is, there's always some kind of stereotype associated with that bad guy. And a lot of times too, it taps into whatever cultural group is kind of being most negatively viewed at that time. It's only until the most recent Bond movies has that changed kind of a little bit. One of the things that I've noted in the TV shows that I've watched is how they position women and minorities in the show. This is something I want to kind of challenge you guys to look at as you're watching TV shows, things like that. How are they depicting men and women relative to each other, minorities, individuals with lower status, in these TV shows? One of the things I'm really excited about, and actually influences my choice of TV show now, is how they do this. Okay, so one of the shows that we've gotten into is Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. And so it's kind of a fun show, but one of the things that I think is really interesting about the show is that they're positioning men and women to be very equal. Okay, so Zoe's a leader of actually all male programmers. Her boss is also a female. They're talking about kind of being empowered. Some of the males in the show are kind of more sensitive, so they're not this masculine stereotype persona all the time. And it makes for a really interesting TV show where everyone really has this kind of balance. So keep an eye on that, see how that potentially is influencing portrayals of men and women in kind of real life, the assessment of them. Okay? We can also then go back to violent video games and aggression, which is where we're going to be headed here in a moment. One of the things that's most unique here is that people randomly assigned to play ultra-violent video games showed increases in hostility. Okay, so remember, when we design experiments, when we're randomly assigning participants to conditions, that this is a way to establish causality. We know that playing violent video games does increase levels of hostility. Okay, so you might say, well, hey, so far you've only talked about media as only making things worse for people, increasing hostility. What about media is causing positive scripts, causing positive outcomes? And in fact, that is the case as well. Okay, so people playing in a game that involved helping characters, okay, showed an increase in real life helping. Okay, so the idea here is that these video games, the media that we're consuming, is developing scripts both positive and negative. Okay, it may be the case that we focus a little more on the negative because that may be the most harmful impact, but we can also see that this is not just about creating hostility with these violent video games. Okay? We also see, too, that people have acted out violent acts from video games. Okay, so people who played the most violent games tend to be the most aggressive. Okay, so people have acted out violent acts from video games. We've seen this in terms of violent acts that have occurred. We've tied it back to violent video games. In some cases, very much not in all. But we see when researchers have people play violent video games, they tend to become more aggressive. Okay? And so what I'm going to do here is actually read to you the results of one of these studies. Okay, so give me just a second to pull this up. But it's interesting, I'll actually read you the specific results that researchers found with this scenario. And I'll explain the study here in just a little bit. So bear with me for just 2 seconds here. So Bushman and Anderson had participants play either a violent or non-violent video game. Okay, so in their games, they either played things like Duke Nukem. It's kind of, the study is a little bit older. Okay? Or what they did is they had them play Tetris. Okay? And so again, kind of a neutral game. You're still active. You're still doing things. Okay? Oops, hang on. All right, hang on, guys. Sorry, I need to flip out here to get the notes. Okay. And what they found, okay, as they looked at their study, is that participants became more aggressive when playing those violent video games compared to those non-violent video games. And the way they did this is that after playing the violent video game or non-violent video game, they then gave participants a scenario. And in this scenario, they asked participants to indicate what they would do or say, okay, how they would behave and how they would feel. So mapping onto our affect, our behavior, and our cognition. Okay, so here's the scenario. and then I'll tell you what the participants said, some of the responses they recorded. Okay, so the scenario after they played either violent or non-violent video game was this. Okay, so they said Todd was on his way home from work one evening, and he had to brake quickly for a yellow light. The person behind him must have thought Todd was going to run the light because he crashed into the back of Todd's car, causing a lot of damage to both vehicles. Fortunately, there were no injuries. Todd got out of his car and surveyed the damage. He then walked over to the other car. They then had participants list 20 things that happened next. So what would Todd do or say, think or feel as the story continued? Okay, so here's the responses they said in terms of do or say. Okay? So for do, they'd say shit, then call the other guy an idiot. So this is what participants wrote down. They would say, what the hell were you thinking? They kick the other driver's car. They would kick the other guy's butt. They would say, think, you're paying for this. They would say, are you smoking crack? Todd starts to throw punches, start yelling and swearing at the guy, say, are you blind? What the hell is wrong with you? I can't believe you have a license. They would kick out a window, beat his head in. The last one here is Todd shot or stabbed the other driver. Okay, so remember, this is their interpretation of the situation just after playing a little bit of video games. In terms of thinking, they would say, or they would think, this guy's dead meat. This guy is dead. I'm going to kill him. What a dumbass. What an asshole. Where did this idiot learn to drive? What the hell? That bastard. I really want to punch the driver's lights out. Stupid idiot moron. I should drive a knife through your eye. If I had a hammer, I'd beat him with it. Okay? In terms of feeling, they would say that they felt irritated, furious, vicious, cruel, pissed off, ready to hit him, aggressive, hate for that guy, angry, violent, like kicking that guy's ass who hit him, angry because he didn't get hurt, meaning the other person didn't get hurt. So you can see that just from actually reading some of the responses participants had, that participants were responding very aggressively, again, to just these short video games that they were playing. All right, so let me pause at this point before I'm going to show you a video of Brad Bushman talking about violent media and aggression. He's a professor in the communications department in Columbus. He's an expert in this area. He's been on various government panels to kind of advise them on how to manage violent media and things like that. But let me pause at this point to see if you have any questions. If you don't, if you're all set, let me know. Just kind of chat back in the group that you're all set. If you do have questions, jump in. All right, looks like we're in good shape here. I appreciate the feedback. Again, we can always jump back to things. So again, what I was alluding to, what I do is talk about, have you watched the Bushman video clip that kind of will review some of the things we talked about with aggression and give us a chance to kind of think about some of the components that he's going to argue. So I'll go ahead and play the video. If for some reason you're not hearing the video, please send me a quick message in chat, but you should be able to hear it. We should be in good shape. Okay, so bear with me for just a second here.
Hello, my name's Brad Bushman. I've been doing research on aggression and violence for over 25 years. Let me begin by defining the terms aggression and violence, because lay people and researchers often use the terms differently. Lay people may describe a salesperson who tries really hard to sell merchandise as aggressive. The salesperson, however, does not want to harm potential customers. Most researchers define aggression as any behavior intended to harm another person who does not want to be harmed. Lay people and researchers also use the term violent differently. A meteorologist might call a storm violent if it has intense winds, rain, thunder, lightning, or hail. Most researchers define violence as aggression that has as its goal extreme physical harm, such as injury or death. Thus, all violence.
All right, guys, it seems like it didn't quite work. Give me just a second to see what's going on with it. Sorry, guys.
Violent acts are aggressive acts.
All right, I think we're in good shape. Let's try it again.
Hello, my name's Brad Bushman. I've been doing research on aggression and violence for over 25 years. Let me begin by defining the terms aggression and violence, because lay people and researchers often use the terms differently. Lay people may describe a salesperson who tries really hard to sell merchandise as aggressive. The salesperson, however, does not want to harm potential customers. Most researchers define aggression as any behavior intended to harm another person who does not want to be harmed. Lay people and researchers also use the term violent differently. A meteorologist might call a storm violent if it has intense winds, rain, thunder, lightning, or hail. Most researchers define violence as aggression that has as its goal extreme physical harm, such as injury or death. Thus, all violent acts are aggressive acts. But not all aggressive acts are violent. Only the ones designed to cause extreme physical harm are violent. It might surprise some people to learn that violence levels around the world have actually declined by millennium, by century, and by decade. These findings are described in Professor Steven Pinker's book titled The Better Angels of Our Nature: Why Violence Has Declined. Quantitative studies of body counts, such as the proportion of prehistoric skeletons with axe or arrowhead wounds, indicate that prehistoric societies were far more violent than our own. Although one can kill a lot more people with a bomb than with an axe, the death rates per battle were much higher in the past than today. Estimates show that if the wars of the 20th century had killed the same proportion of the population as ancient tribal wars, then the death toll would have been 20 times higher, 2 billion rather than 100 million. More recent data also show that violence is declining. European murder rates have decreased dramatically since the Middle Ages. Even since the middle of the 20th century, global violence has been falling steadily. The number of armed conflicts and combat deaths, the number of military coups, the number of deadly violence campaigns waged against civilians have all declined. As Pinker notes, quote, cruelty as entertainment, human sacrifice to indulge superstition, slavery as a labor-saving device, conquest as the mission statement of government, genocide as a means of acquiring real estate, torture and mutilation as routine punishment, all were common features of life for most of human history. But today, they are rare to non-existent in the West, far less common elsewhere than they used to be, concealed when they do occur, and widely condemned when they are brought to light, close quote. Although violence rates are declining, it seems as if current levels of world violence are at an all-time high. One possible explanation for this misperception is that the news media are saturated in violent images. In the news media today, a common phrase is, if it bleeds, it leads. That is, violent, gory news stories often become the leading news stories. Citizen journalists around the world also make use of social media such as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube to show and tell the world about unjustified acts of violence. Some individuals and groups even use social media to broadcast horrific acts of violence. Violence stories trump most other news stories. On the news, violent stories are also repeated frequently as any new information becomes available. These violent images and stories become burned into our memories. Entertainment media are also saturated with violent images. For example, our recent research shows that acts of gun violence in PG-13 movies, for viewers 13 and older, have more than tripled since 1985, the year the rating was introduced. Researchers have been studying aggression for decades. It's important to conduct research so that people don't have to rely on gut feelings, hunches, intuitions, opinions, and common sense. Research can test what beliefs are true and what beliefs are myths. For example, my own research has contradicted many myths that people believe. One common myth is that it's healthy to vent your anger and blow off steam by expressing it. such as by yelling and screaming, punching a pillow, or kicking a trash can. Research shows that this is the worst thing you can do when you're angry. It's like using gasoline to put out a fire. It only feeds the flame. Angry people are highly aroused. Their blood pressure and heart rate are elevated. Venting keeps arousal levels high. It keeps aggressive thoughts active in memory, and it keeps angry feelings strong. Research has shown that it's much better to try to reduce the arousal, such as by taking deep breaths, listening to calming music, or counting to 10. Former U.S. President Thomas Jefferson said, "If you're very angry, you should count to 100 instead." Angry people can also distract themselves or adopt a more distant perspective of the situation, like a fly on the wall. It also helps to do something incompatible with anger and aggression, such as helping someone in need, watching a comedy, kissing a lover, or petting a puppy. Another myth is that aggressive people suffer from low self-esteem. Our research has shown instead that aggressive people tend to be narcissistic. They have inflated, high self-esteem. Narcissists think they are special people who deserve special treatment, and they lash out aggressively against others when they don't get the special treatment they think they're entitled to. Another myth is that violence sells. Our research has shown that people are less likely to remember brands, have more negative attitudes towards them, and are less likely to purchase them when they are embedded in violent media than when they're embedded in nonviolent media. This is probably because we are hardwired to pay attention to violent cues based on our evolutionary past. Because humans have limited attentional capacity, if we pay attention to violent cues, we have less capacity to pay attention to the advertised brands. Like most social problems, scientific research is a promising avenue for solutions to the problems of aggression and violence.
All right. Okay, so give me just a second to switch us back. So one of the things he does is kind of highlights the different pieces of research. You know, he's part of kind of a much larger debate that's going on in terms of violent media lead to kind of violence in real life. And so that's actually something, if we had class all together, we would debate that. Unfortunately, because we don't have kind of the best platform for doing that, and we're kind of running a bit behind because we had to get things set up, what I can do is kind of leave things here with that. But I know that there's arguments kind of on both sides of violent media leading to aggression. I want you to think about that as you're studying, as you're processing this information. And I'm happy to kind of debate that with you, talk with you about it more at a different time. But for the sake of things, we do have to kind of keep things going. But I want to pause at this point to see if there's any last questions as we finish covering aggression as a whole, especially aggression in the media. Okay, otherwise, we'll go ahead and then get into pro-social behavior. All right, so give me just a moment. I'm going to change this over. We'll start talking about our last social psychology topic, which is going to be talking about pro-social behavior. All right, so give me just a moment to get us set up here.